In the first part of the video, I will be making a case for why morality is strategy through different arguments and lenses. And in the second part of the video, I will ask questions on where does your morality begin if you happen to oppose the view that morality does not exist or is just strategy. So feel free to challenge me. I will go through my claims and arguments. I have my notes down on the floor, that's why I'll be looking down sometimes. So I will be taking elements of the will to power, emotivism, egocentrism, and game theory, and value hierarchies in general. So let's run through these really quick. Will to power, that's the idea of Nietzsche, especially laid out in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. And it is the claim that the will to power is even more fundamental than the will to life. Now, I am not sure if I agree with that, but there is something that's important in that thought is that what we care about is basically advancing our own structure. We can look at will to power through a biological lens and see that there are self-organizing structures. That's what we call animals or living things and crystals for some reason. Those are self-organizing structures, and all they want to do is to expand their structure, their order, and it's always to grow more than you shrink, expand your species more than you die. That's the will to power, and exists in every individual human being or animal, and on a larger scale of just a species. That would be a biological interpretation. That is not what Nietzsche has said. Okay, then we have emotivism. That's the idea that your morals are just intuitions, just feelings. So the claim of an emotivist would be that all that you're really doing when you say something like murder is bad is going, I don't like murder. Or even more simple, just going, boo, murder. And on the other hand, when you say something like, I think having friends is a good thing and everyone should be included in a social community, all you're really doing is going, yay people, yay social life, yay friends. I like friends. That's all you're saying when having friends are good, is I like having friends. Then egocentrism, that's the idea of altruism does not exist. Anything you do for your own sake. You can only care for someone else because you care for your own caring of someone else. So if I see a homeless person in the street and I feel bad for them and then give them money, the reason I give the homeless person money is so that I no longer feel bad about walking away from the homeless person. I see suffering, I feel it in myself, I want to linder suffering in the other person, but the only reason I would do that is because it causes me suffering. If I wouldn't care about the suffering of a homeless person, I would just walk past him. So the reason I do is because I have this feeling that I want to get rid of, so that's why I give the homeless person money. It is self-serving even though I give someone else something. So egocentrism, everything you do for your own sake. Another interesting thought is you have never contradicted yourself. And this gets me into talking about value structures and value hierarchies and what you actually care about. We're not loyal to the value of, I'm not going to say cuss words, let's say if you don't cuss around your grandparents, okay? You're not loyal to that idea, yet you will not cuss around your grandparents, okay? So you won't drink in a business meeting, but you will drink with your friends, all of these things. So there's no principle that you have that isn't contextual, that doesn't adapt itself to a circumstance. But any principle that changes depending on the circumstance is not a principle. It is situational. And if it is situational, why is it situational? Because the benefit of adapting to a situation is that you get to optimize it for something. Now the question is, for what are you optimizing? Now again, it's your self-expansion, even in biological sense, offspring, safety, DNA spreading, or just your own sense of power. I've toyed with the idea of it's not will to power, it's will to powerful identity a while back, which would expand the idea of what you actually want is to feel as powerful as possible, not to be as powerful as possible, which I think would make more intuitive sense of why we lie to ourselves so constantly and why we live in delusion, because delusions can make us feel more powerful. We would often rather live in a fantasy of where we are in charge and where we are in control of things, or where we are really suffering and not in charge of things. And then we kind of have a virtue in all of the suffering, and then the world would owe us something because of our suffering or because we are powerful. So you either go to believe you're more powerful than you are, to then have the belief or that you can influence more things that you can influence because that's beneficial, or that you are less powerful than you think, but then therefore gain a power through entitlement in a way, or expecting things of others or of the universe because you are in a lower position because of your suffering. And this is what also Nietzsche is getting at, essentially, how morals work in general. They are a mechanism of gaining power. This truly strong person doesn't concern himself with morality, he just does. He doesn't say, oh, like he will expand his power, but not through making moral claims. He doesn't make moral claims because the only reason to make moral claims about yourself or about the world is to enhance your own ability to impact the world or to elevate your position within the world. So if values aren't contradictory, what are the values we actually care about? Now, is it as simple as survival and passing on genes? Or is it the expansion of power? Or this my idea of the will to powerful identity? Editor me here, I don't actually know what the most fundamental principle or value is, but whatever it is, whether it is just passing on genes or this will to power or whatever, it is the principle that ties, it is the value that ties all of our different value or hierarchies dependent on context together. It is the principle guiding which hierarchy of values to impose on ourselves, onto the world in any given situation. That is, whatever that is the most fundamental or highest value, that the most dearest value to us. But what we can be sure of is that motivation is a feeling, and feelings are within ourselves. Motivation being the thing that drives you to do things. Motivation, I'm just using the same as will, okay? So motivation is a feeling, and feelings are within ourselves. And if we are loyal to our feelings or deepest values, they will be about us. We can only care for others' issues if we care for our caring of them, okay? That's the whole point of I care about my caring of your suffering. If I wouldn't care for your suffering, I wouldn't care for my caring for your suffering, right? So, okay. Here begin my questions. Where does your morality start? And I will be provocative. I am going to make the claim the amount of morality that is possible to you is essentially the same as the one of an animal. I don't see a lot of difference between human morality and animal morality. That is very provocative, and it has horrible implications that I'm not a fan of, but we will get to them too because they're pretty interesting. Okay, so I will just now list off these questions and you can stop the video and think about them because I'm just going to run through them. When your alarm goes off at 5, 6, or 7, so you can go to work, is that compliance, a system limiting you, or are you affirming the values of a society by partaking in it? By the way, if this is an interesting question to you, look into social contract theory. In a slower way, is compliance to a power structure a moral decision, or are you just forced to do so? When you wake up, is it a moral choice if you eat, brush your teeth, shower, or go to the bathroom first? Is what you eat a moral decision? To what extent? How precise are you willing to get when discussing morality and diet? Is it moral what job you work? Some are immoral, let's say we grant that, Does it make others moral or just convenient? Is following your passion moral? Is being responsible moral? Is it moral if you're both passionate about your work and it is moral or not immoral? What about your free time? Is scrolling moral? Meeting friends? I know I'm asking you a lot of questions, but tell me, what action did you take in the last week or month that came from moral principles? Maybe the problem is principles we discussed. They change depending on what serves the ultimate goal, the things we mentioned. But how can morals not follow principles? How can we conclude anything to be moral if we aren't even going to have set rules? Can we place intuition that high? Or wouldn't that just lead to us being led by our feelings and intuitions again? In court, pleading insanity is a thing because we judge someone's behavior less harshly when their agency is questionable. But who is to say whose agency is questionable and whose isn't? So picture this scenario. You have a man driving to a bar to meet up with his friends. He plans to drink, but he plans also to go home in either an Uber or a taxi or by a friend. Now, as it happens, he gets very drunk, and as drunk people do, they get impulsive. So him being impulsive, he gets into his car and drives home. Wouldn't he have likely not done that if he stayed sober? Should we therefore then be liable for influences in altered states of consciousness when we premeditated the altered state of consciousness? Who is to say that insanity is an altered state of consciousness? If anything, insanity seems to be a mechanism of the brain inside of the brain's own capabilities, but alcohol is an external addition to the brain. So isn't being drunk more of an altered state than being insane? We have more agency when drunk than when insane. Okay, so that's really the point. We care about agency. I share the intuition, by the way. If there is such a thing as free will, it is in conscious behavior, agency. If free will exists, then in the stopping of impulse and choosing behavior instead of reacting, arguably breaking causality as presented in strict determinism. But we don't need to believe in strict determinism to not believe in free will. I'm just saying this to, if there is a stop in impulse, then we are becoming a new agent. That, if there are just things moving, if you react, let's say someone says something mean to you and you just snap back, let's say that would be a reaction. If there wasn't a thought, if there wasn't a hesitancy, if there wasn't a pause, then you just reacted. Someone says something to you and you just react. That is not conscious behavior. Like an animal could have done that. What a human can do is look at his impulse, look at his reaction, and then respond. It is someone going, you look silly. If you're in a state of agency, you can either de-escalate or you can just decide to fire back anyways. But there is this point in time where you stop. You don't just continue the flow of force in that sense of kinetic energy, but you halt it and you redirect the kinetic energy. That is that is what free will would be if it exists. So the claim here basically is what separates human from animal is agency through consciousness. But we want the same things as them, we just take more complicated routes. It is still animal function. Human morality, therefore, can only be conscious. That's what we just laid out. Anything done from the subconscious was not moral unless you say animals follow morality. So this holds implications. 1, can you judge animal actions, subconscious reactions of humans with moral judgments if they aren't based on conscious reasoning? If no, how would you deal with people consciously seeing this as a loophole to get away with things? I plead animal instinct might then become a viable claim or a viable appeal in court. If such a thing as pleading insanity works, then why doesn't plead animal instinct work? And as a matter of fact, it does in self-defense. You're not rationally thinking about if you're going to strike back. No, you will fight for your life. And if you then go too far, you will still be excused for that because something took over. That's the language we would use. Right? But nothing took over. That's just you. There was no altered state of consciousness, I would say. It was just the state of consciousness that exists in that situation. But it's not any more altered than if you... The difference between going on a walk and going out to drink, those are different states of consciousness, but both of them are natural. They're not altered in the sense, they're altered in the same sense that being attacked and defending yourself is an altered state of consciousness. Okay, so, and then you can say brain activity if your prefrontal cortex shuts down, but that just leads us to more questions. And like back to the drinking one, prefrontal cortex activity slows down or becomes less active when drunk. So that argument still doesn't work. So where would you draw the line between human morality and animal morality? If you draw one, by the way, you will run into inconsistencies. They just will be there because any principles will run into inconsistencies. So that's the problem of ethics in philosophy. There will always be a niche case where your ethics turn out to be the most cruel and horrible thing ever invented, no matter how peaceful and loving you think your ethics are, if they are genuine ethics. So, 2, most people are consciously aware of very little. Therefore, should you treat them as majority animal? If someone isn't self-aware, can you judge them for their behavior if they don't understand it? That's the whole point of Jesus Christ saying, Father in heaven, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing. That's the point. Forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing. If they would know what they were doing, you shouldn't forgive them. But they don't understand what they're doing. And even if you feel like, even if you have like an instinct of like, I know I shouldn't lie to this person, but you feel bad even while you're doing it, not just afterwards. You still don't know. Like the whole point is you don't know the gravity of your sins. That is why you sin. If you truly understood the depth and the tragedy of your sins, you wouldn't sin. So you don't understand your sin. You don't understand. You aren't consciously aware of your bad behavior. You do not know what you're doing, so you will be forgiven. I have interesting things to say about religion, but that's not for this video. And I am kind of changing my mind lately. So therefore, should you treat people as majority animal? If we are like, if the difference between us is, if at all, very little, and probably different in between different people. Some people are more self-aware than others. How do you deal with that? Should you get punished for being more self-aware because now you're more responsible for your bad behavior? Or should you further conscious awareness through schools and possible other ways? If you teach people to be self-aware, they still won't be perfect. Should you treat them as 80% human moral agent and only 20% immoral animal? Assuming you can get even close to that, which I highly doubt. So these are questions. Yeah, so where are your morals? Where is your morality? I think I laid out a case for why I don't believe in morality, and if there is such a thing as morality, it would have to be in conscious awareness, but feel free to challenge that as well. And yeah, what makes your animal, what makes you different from an animal when it comes to morals? Let me know in a practical sense. Give me an example. And I'm not saying this to be cocky, I'm just genuinely curious because I haven't seen an answer to this. Yeah, this is also an idea I'll be working and improving on. I wrote all of this down in like a few minutes, so, and then just rambled. Almost dropped my laptop. Yeah, that is this yap sesh by this young fellow, and let me know. Let me know your takes.